Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Meet the Mentors panel. My name is Alexandra Higgle-Timms, and I serve as the Program Manager at the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management. We appreciate you all joining and are excited to kick off our discussion in just a few moments. Today, we'll learn a little more about four of our mentors, Becca Boss, Turo, Dexter, Andrew Kovach, and Elaine Price. But before we begin, as always, we do have a few housekeeping items and ground rules. So please note that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Levin College's YouTube channel. Additionally, we're reserving the last 25 minutes or so for audience questions. So the chat function has been disabled, but please send any questions you have for a panelist in the designated Q&A box at any time. So you'll be able to just simply type your questions there. And again, you can send them throughout today's discussion. Today's panel will be moderated by two mentees and current students at the Levin College. With that said, I'd like to formally introduce our moderators for today, Ameera, Meri, and Emily Dahnert. We'll begin with Ameera. Ameera is a current mentee and our graduate assistant for the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management at Levin. She's worked with our center for over 2 years as both a student assistant and a graduate assistant. Currently, she assists us at the center with student enrichment and professional development programs. In addition to working with our team, Ameera serves as the Site Strategies Intern for the Regional Economic Development Agency, Team NEO. Ameera will graduate with her master's in public administration this spring and aspires to pursue a career in economic development. Thank you for being here today, Ameera. All right, next up, I'd like to introduce Emily. Emily is currently a student in the Master of Nonprofit Administration and Leadership program. She's also part of Levin's 4+1 program. Emily is a mentee and comes to Cleveland State by way of Cuyahoga Community College, where she earned an Associate of Arts degree. Emily moved to Cleveland Heights just over 5 years ago. And when she is not pinned to the couch by her extremely cuddly cat, you will most likely find her in a public library, on a pickleball court, or in her mother's small vegetable garden. Emily is passionate about racial justice, social equity, LGBTQ rights, and chronic illness, and hopes to get involved in community development work in the future. Welcome, Emily, and thanks for being here today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our moderators, Ameera and Emily, to introduce our panelists. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. We're going to just kick it off with introducing our awesome mentors. So first, I'm going to introduce Becca Boss, who she is not here at the moment, but she should be joining in just a few moments. So Becca is an Ohio boomerang who proudly calls Cleveland her forever home after several decades living all over the country. Her experiences as a U.S. Marine, military spouse, parent, public administrator, and volunteer yield a unique perspective on service and the importance of community. She is a passionate advocate for systems and policies that yield better outcomes for children and families. Becca holds a Master of Public Administration degree from UNC Chapel Hill and a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy. She currently serves as a supervisor at the UH Rainbow Center for Child Health and Policy, where she spends her days surrounded by an amazing team of public health researchers dedicated to systems of care that address health disparities. Becca and her husband, Dave, are raising 4 incredible, energetic children. Her motto is, "I will never be bored." And I'll leave it to Emily to introduce Turo.
Thanks, Ameera, and thank you, Alexandra and Rob, and everyone for being here. This is Mr. Turo Dexter. He serves as the Federal Transit Administration as its Knowledge Management Officer. He facilitates knowledge sharing activities while managing the agency's intranet and several organizational development programs. Turo moved to Washington, D.C. as a Presidential Management Fellow after earning his Master of Public Administration from the Cleveland State University's Levin College. Originally from Minneapolis, he brought 25 years of experience as a technology consultant and developer, which included helping to establish the Cuyahoga County Land Bank as its first director of IT. He was the first student to graduate from the college's 4+1 Urban Studies and MPA program, and served as CSU's Winter 2009 University Valedictorian. He and his wife, Susan, live in Fairfax County, Virginia, and are eager to help familiarize Levin colleagues with federal service and the Pmf program. Thank you very much for being here.
Next, I want to introduce Andrew Kovach, Program Officer of the Program Officer for International Visitors at the Cleveland Council on World Affairs. Andrew holds an MA in Global Interactions from Cleveland State University, where he also completed his undergraduate degrees in International Relations and Political Science. He first joined the Council in 2015 as a development assistant, and then assumed a role as International Visitor Program Associate before being promoted to his current role as Program Officer. In 2019, he was recognized as Exchange Programmer of the Year by Global Ties US. His other professional experiences have focused on nonprofit work for Cleveland's refugee community.
And last, but certainly not least, we have Ms. Elaine Price. Elaine A. Price serves as Principal Planner for Greenspace for Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, serving 59 communities. Her work drives strategic initiatives around green space, waterways, and regional trail systems. Elaine began her career as an environment, health, and safety professional in industry-leading firms including Sohio, British Petroleum, Chase Brass and Copper, American Steel and Wire, and GE. GE's EHS and Six Sigma quality programs advanced Ms. Price into management through a series of global assignments, and ultimately in human resources. Elaine left GE to lead the Holden Arboretum as president and CEO. Elaine is a graduate of Leadership Cleveland in 2005 and Leadership Lake County in 2002. Elaine earned her BA double major in biology and environmental studies and her MS in environmental science at Indiana University Bloomington. Elaine enjoys gardening, cycling, cooking, and activities with her churches. She resides in Cleveland Heights with her husband. Thank you very much for being here. So to start things off, we want to see if there was anything that we didn't capture in those amazing bios. We all know you have a wealth of qualifications and they're really incredible, but we want to see if there's anything else you'd like to share about your current role and how that looks on a day-to-day basis, and anything else you would like to share about your professional and academic background. So if you don't mind starting, Elaine, I can kick it off with you.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here, and welcome to everyone out there whom we cannot see, but I hope you're there and going to have a good time. No, I think one thing is I grew up in the Chicago area, and I was supposed to take a job with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C., and there was a glitch in the hiring, and I stopped in this town called Cleveland, Ohio to do what I thought was a 3-month internship. And I'm clicking in 38 or 39 years this coming June. So I can't emphasize enough how important internships are in giving all of us and you guys a taste of what a different career path might be. So it really was an internship that got me to Cleveland, got me into Sohio, did a couple of rounds of internships, then that's how then I took the next step into a permanent position. So I'm going to hand it to Andrew. Becca, we're doing the baton passing.
Yes, thanks so much, Elaine, taking the baton here. It's great to be here. Thanks so much inviting me to be a part of this panel today, and an honor to be in the company of 3 other esteemed mentors through the Levin College here. And shout out to my mentee, Sean Payne, if you're out there. It's been really great connecting with you this year. So just, I guess, to fill in a few more gaps about my professional background, as Ameera said, I'm a program officer with the Cleveland Council on World Affairs International Exchange Programs. Vast majority of these are U.S. Department of State sponsored exchanges, which most of them are adult professional exchanges, but we also do youth exchange programs as well as fellowship type of programs where international visitors might be in Cleveland for as little as a week or up to a month and beyond. And it is my role as program officer to be the point person in designing their program, welcoming them to Cleveland, and acting as a liaison for them while they're on the ground here in Northeast Ohio. It's really such a fun and dynamic role to play at the Cleveland Council on World Affairs, and really just an honor to represent the city of Cleveland to over 400 international visitors each year. Academically, I'm a graduate of Cleveland State University, not through the Levin College actually, but the political science department, which at the time was under the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, which I believe I heard that there's a rumor that that is moving under the Levin College, which is kind of exciting. But I graduated in 2017 with my master's in global interactions through the 4+1 program through the international relations program. So that's just a little bit more context about my professional and academic background. And I will pause there for now, and I'll pass the baton on to Turo.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to take a minute to build on Elaine's points about the value of internships. When I was working on my 4+1 at Levin about 12 years ago, I had to set up an internship, and one day Jim Rakakis, who was the county treasurer at the time, came in to talk to our political science class, minor for me, at CSU, and this was 2009 or so, and he was teaching us about subprime mortgages and securitization of mortgages and the impact of those on Cleveland, which ended up making it the epicenter of the foreclosure crisis for a period of time, and ultimately leading to huge numbers of vacant and abandoned homes. And he made such an impact that I went up to him and said, dude, I need, or Mr. Treasurer, I need to set up an internship. I want to come and work for you. This is devastating what's going on. You seem to have a grasp of this, that that in the kinds of depth that I haven't seen before. And can we talk? And he invited me to come in, and this led to an internship helping to plan what became the Cuyahoga County Land Bank. In the basement of the old administration building, working for Jim. It turned into a consulting engagement, which then later turned into what was still really a consulting engagement because I was never an employee, but a formal role at the land bank as its first director of IT, where I was proud to serve until I ended up picking up my things and moving out to DC to take a federal job. It was a really, really hard decision, but I always refer to that as the internship that got out of hand, because I was so proud of the work that the land bank was doing under the leadership of Gus Frankos, who's still leading it. And there's billions of dollars of economic impact attributed to the land bank in its first 10 years of operation, which it celebrated a couple of years ago. But a couple of things there that I did that where I wouldn't have had that opportunity. I mean, it was really hard to tear myself away and come out here. Not necessarily because of what I was doing at the land bank, but being part of such an important thing and working for people that I respected so much. First thing I did was I went up and I asked for what I wanted. I said, Jim, I want an internship. No ask, no get. That's what my first boss at my current employer would say all the time. You've got to ask for what you want. And then just pouring myself into it and learning everything I could about what was at that point a new field for me of basically real estate from the municipality's perspective and the impacts of the tax base on a community, and how many Cuyahoga communities' tax bases went darn close to nothing in the wake of the foreclosure crisis. I mean, that was new to me, but it ended up becoming one of the most important things in my life because of Cleveland State and somebody in the class who was related to Jim and ended up getting him in there. But I give Cleveland State the credit and going up and asking for that internship. One thing led to another and led to another and led to another. And if you can't tell, I'm really proud to talk about my experience there. So I hope that you take that step yourselves and have similar experiences yourself to brag about later on. And I'll pass it to Becca. Hi, Becca. Glad you're with us.
Hello. Thank you so much. Sorry, everyone, I was late. I was trying to extract myself from the I don't even know what number of meetings it is today. Really, thank you all for joining. I think the fact that we've been, probably many of us, on Zoom an awful lot today makes this, that much more of an extension of our day, but hopefully we can have some meaningful connections and conversations. I think that it's really, I can't say enough to echo what Elaine and Turo have already talked about with regard to internships. That's absolutely was really foundational to the role that I'm in now, and to helping me understand how to sort of direct and focus my efforts when it came time to start looking for a full-time job. As I think Ameera mentioned probably in my bio, that I went through kind of a scenic route to my current professional role, where I spent the first part of my career in the military, and then I was a stay-at-home mom for a decade. And that's a pretty significant transition back to full-time work. And that in and of itself was a job to try to get back to work. But I think that it was really important to come at that from the perspective of presenting the unique path that I took as an advantage, and making sure that people saw it that way and that they understood that I saw it that way. And I think that really translated when it came time to apply for full-time jobs. I've been in my current role now for about 4 years, and I love the fact that I consider myself a public service generalist, and I can come into just about any conversation and kind of take a step back and look at how what I understand and know as a mom, as a member of the community, as a passionate advocate for children and health outcomes, and be able to ask questions that might make people think differently about what they are doing and about how they're problem solving within our healthcare system. So I'm excited to be here today and look forward to the rest of our conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, great. So Turo joined back. So we just want to, you guys already kind of went over your background, but we just have one more question. So I want to ask each of you, what originally drew you to public service? A lot of the people on the call right now are at the Levin College, are working within the public sector, and you guys are such inspiring people, working within the public sector. So what originally drew you to public service? I know a lot of you already spoke about how you got your current position, but if there's anything you want to add, and what is the most fulfilling part of your position? And we can start off, Becca, since you just talked, you can just kick us off.
So looping back to my professional start in the military, that really set up my life for success and dramatically changed how I viewed the world. My world went very quickly from like a small town outside of Toledo to like a globe. And I absolutely recognize that that was the result of privilege and in some cases really luck, and a lot of hard work too. But I have always felt that the fact that I got this incredible education, that I had all these opportunities to work with a variety of people, and really challenge myself, that I needed to find a way, a purposeful way to professionally pay that back, because that's kind of at the foundation for our family. My husband's a veteran as well. And so I think that for me, it was very much about recognizing that there is a lot of important work to do, and that we really should be looking around the world that we live in and figuring out how we make it better for the people who live here now, for the next generation, and that there are a lot of different ways to do that that make us feel passionate and purposeful and energized. And as hard as it is to get out of the bed every day and think about what's going to challenge me today, and really for the team that I work with, very much of that is around equity and around addressing health disparities. And so for me, it's really fulfilling to know that we're working together to address those, and to think about how we do make things better tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now. Oh, I'm supposed to pass it. I'm going to punt it back to Turo.
Thanks, Becca. I think there was a turning point in my career prior to going for my degree, when I was serving as a technology consultant. We were in the process of trying to climb out of the dot-com crisis, which itself was a bit of a struggle for me and had put a damper on my business. I had been building web systems for companies, and doing training in general technology consulting. And then one day, people flew airplanes into tall buildings in New York. And it was, and my business evaporated. My clients stopped spending money, but it also really drove home for me the idea that if I'm going to be staying up all night on projects, figuring out how to do innovative things and move the needle for the people who hired me, I wanted to leave the world a better place in my wake. And so I started focusing my work on nonprofits and candidates whose positions I supported. And one thing led to another. It was, I moved to Cleveland to work for a particular candidate, and one thing led to another, and I found out about Cleveland State, and I found out about the Levin College, and by then the course was clear. Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, I think what drove me to public service and the nonprofit sector is a lot of the kind of mission-driven work of the Cleveland Council on World Affairs had aligned with a lot of what I deemed important, I guess, in high school, and then in my, years, as undergrad at Cleveland State University, just aligning with my values of an interest in understanding others from around the world, promoting mutual understanding, global connections, and just realizing how much there is out there, beyond Cleveland. And certainly, I guess a few of the other panelists already mentioned kind of how internships had driven their career path. And that's definitely true for me as well, because the Cleveland Council on World Affairs was the very first internship / professional career job that I had my freshman year at Cleveland State University. The very first week of school, just went on the CSU career portal, and I knew I was studying international relations, and I wanted to find out what is going on in Cleveland internationally. I'm from the Cleveland area originally, grew up mostly in Avon, but somewhat removed from what was actually going on in the city itself. And through CSU's career portal, just stumbled upon the Cleveland Council on World Affairs and had an amazing year-long internship. And I just loved every moment of it, and just the staff members and the individuals there, and at Cleveland Council on World Affairs and at CSU that took a lot of time and patience to to mentor me and give me some skill sets around the nonprofit field. And just obviously the mission of the council is, I think, what really kept me there to today. So I think that's a little bit about what drove me and what keeps me going each day in public service or the nonprofit sector. I guess over to Elaine.
Great, thanks. I'm not sure I would say that I was drawn to the public sector. The public sector found me, and I said, well, let's kind of figure it out. But I want to kind of go back to my knowledge of the public sector, and that goes back to graduate school. So I went to Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs. And there were about 15 of us in the environmental program, and there were about 30 to 40 in the public affairs program. My roommate was on the public affairs side in public health, but the bottom line is we all partied together. So that's how I learned a little bit about what this public stuff was. Somebody was into public accounting and somebody else was going into urban and regional planning. But I didn't think much more of it other than interacting with my fellow grad students back in Indiana. So my career, I wanted to get into, I specialized in industrial water pollution, and landed in Cleveland, had a chance to get into heavy industry and cycled through a couple of different companies doing environment, health and safety, and wearing a pair of steel-toed shoes and a hard hat. And then when I was at General Electric, had a chance to work overseas. Andrew, you and I need to chat about some more things, but I had the privilege of working in about 18 different countries before I left GE. And then I come back and I get promoted into a couple things, leave GE, go to lead the Holden Arboretum. So now I'm in nonprofit. And actually it was, I met someone at the director of the County Planning Commission who was looking for someone to do Greenspace work in a strategic way. And it was my background of business and nonprofit and strategy stuff that caused him to say, wow, I really need somebody like you. And I was looking for something different at the moment. So I stumbled on it. I really didn't plan on staying in the public sector that long. I thought I'd go on and, get back into private sector. But as I did more and learned more, I really developed an appreciation that public sector work in the United States of America is driven by the democratic process. And that means people have to be involved as well, citizens, and we serve the citizens. And We're not a General Electric with a person at the top like this guy named Jack Welch who can just basically make a decision and everything goes. So I've really developed an appreciation for how we need to use our skills of communication, awareness, and influence to help people kind of see what are the best things for our society, to then make decisions that then allocate resources that then allow us to start to implement the programs for the good of the people. So that's my 2 cents on that. Pass it back to our moderators.
Thank you all so much for sharing. We want to transition now into some more moderator-specific questions. And with that in mind, if any of our participants have any questions they would like to ask, we have a Q&A bar on the bottom here. And so we'll start transitioning to that in about half an hour if you have anything that is coming up. And so our first question is actually back to you, Elaine. And you definitely touched on this a little bit, but we wanted to see, are there key differences that students should look out for when they're deciding between the private, public, and nonprofit sectors?
Sure. And I thought about this and kind of wanted to package it up into kind of 4 components. What you want to be asking first is, what does this organization do? Kind of what and for whom. The second is, how do they do it? What's the structure that defines that organization? The third thing is, how is this organization funded? What's their source of income, revenue, or funding? And then the fourth is, what is its culture like? So I'll kind of run through these kind of quickly, but for-profit private sector organizations are, to me, the most dynamic. And I'd also like to really come out and say, there is absolutely nothing wrong with making money, okay? Sometimes I think people say, ooh, bad, you went to the dark side. No, all money originates in the free market. And if you think about somebody who works for government, they're getting paid and they deserve a paycheck, but that money's coming from taxes, and taxes originate from the exchange of goods and services and the fact that people own property. So what makes for-profit interesting, though, is that it is very much a cause and effect driven business. And so it's very nimble and it has to change very fast, because if it's delivering a product, a service, or an experience for the customers, and if they're not doing it at the best quality, the best service, and the best price, that customer is going to go someplace else. That business isn't going to get their revenue, and they're going to collapse. So the for-profit private sector moves very nimbly, but it's driven by, it has to survive, because in general, it's not subsidized. When we look at public sector, so we in the public sector, we are bound by code and procedures that have been set up that govern how our organization operates. Okay, so, and again, I think we're learning a lot of this is, people will, call me up and say, oh, you are the Greenspace planner for Cuyahoga County. You should do this or that or the other. And then I have to unravel and say, I don't have any authority whatsoever. My agency doesn't have any authority. All decision-making about land use happens within the municipality structure, okay? Nonprofits are governed by boards. You also have codes and things like that, and driven by mission. And so, again, an executive director, a staff person can't just do whatever they want. They have to be operating within the governance of what their organization is about. So those are kind of 3 main things. Again, I think funding is important to look at. Again, in the government world, our salaries are paid because some people, everybody's paying taxes. In the nonprofit world, it's a triangle, okay? So let me just use something as simple as the food bank. The people who are the recipients of the services of the food bank are not funding the food bank. That's why they're going to the food bank, is because they don't have the money for food. You have somewhere at the other corner of the triangle, you have donors, you have some government, you have foundations that provide the money to the operations of the food bank to be able to deliver the goods and services to the people who need them. So you need to understand that component of it. And then the last point is culture, and this transcends all of them. No matter which type of organization it is, there are some great cultures and there are some horrible cultures. There are some cultures that have kept up with diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, advancement of women, and there are those who haven't. And so just be aware of that. You know, I'm not going to say for-profit is always leading, because that's not true. That's not true at all. So that's kind of how I see, that's what my experience has been in working in the private for-profit world, working in the nonprofit world, and working in the government world now.
Thanks, Elaine, so much. And again, to the audience, if you have any follow-up questions to what Elaine mentioned or about anything else that might come up to your mind, put those there in the Q&A section. So next, I want to transition to Andrew. So Andrew, I noticed that you were once an International Visitors Leadership Program intern. Myself, I've never heard of that internship. So can you speak a little bit about that program and your experience, whether, you know, is it still going on? You recommend it? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, so the International Visitor Leadership Program is the specific State Department exchange that I primarily work on, and the exchange program through which the Cleveland Council on World Affairs serves as a nonprofit private sector partner or subcontractor through the State Department. So the International Visitor Leadership Program is a 80-year-old exchange program. That's the premier professional exchange program through the State Department. If you have heard of the Fulbright program, it is up there as, you know, along with the Fulbright program, as one of the main federal government sponsored exchanges. I don't think a lot of US citizens know about the Ivlp Exchange because it is for foreign professionals who pre-COVID would be invited to the US on 2 or 3 week long study tours, if you will, where they will visit multiple cities, and Cleveland might just be one of those city stops where they will explore a specific professional topic, such as it could be a group of artists looking at promoting social change through the arts, or NGO management, or transparency and accountability in government, or water resource management, or public health, whatever it might be. So we'll act as the local point people designing their local itinerary and showing them around Cleveland, if you will. So what this program looks like since March of 2020 is a virtual exchange program, mostly on Zoom here. So I think like all of us, we had a busy day of Zoom meetings, and same here, just going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting with international participants from around the world, which is a lot of fun, except when there's a crazy time zone difference and I have like a 7 a.m. call with Europe, or it might be the reverse, like an 8 p.m. with Australia. Yeah, those are never all that fun. But yeah, so the Cleveland Council on World Affairs, we have typically relied on interns. Obviously, I just gave my background as an intern with the program, and really, I guess yeah, it was such a great internship because I actually felt like I did something meaningful and not just like making copies or making coffee, whatever it is. I was writing proposals to get some of these groups to come to Cleveland. I was actually out with the the international visitors, showing them around Cleveland. My very first day as an intern, actually, this was back in 2013, was going to the airport with a little welcome to Cleveland sign and introducing a group that had never been to, obviously never been to Cleveland. I don't think most of them even had heard of Cleveland before. And that was, it was a really fun day. And I kind of just got hooked on it from there. So I hope that answered your question. But going back to one thing Elaine said about the funding and not being afraid too of asking for money. That is so true, Elaine. And I think it's even more so in the nonprofit sector where, there's sort of this a notion out there that, we do this from the heart and that, money doesn't matter at all. Well, meanwhile, I think it is important to keep in mind, we are professionals with a very specific skill set, and that deserves compensation, just like any other field. So just wanted to echo that point you made, Elaine. I completely agree. So, and thank you for the question, Ameera.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Our next question is for Turo. And we know that you were involved with the Presidential Management Fellows Program. And so we were wondering if you have any specific advice for students who are looking to get involved in federal service.
Yeah, sure. I'm really glad I made this move. When you're a federal employee, I work for the executive branch, right? There's, the three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. The executive branch, which incorporates the Department of Defense, by the way, is, all of those government agencies that you think of: HHS, energy, in my case, the Department of Transportation. And you serve the interests of the current executive, that is to say, presidential administration. When Donald Trump was in office for 4 years, I worked for Donald Trump. Now that Joe Biden is in office, I work for Joe Biden. Many levels removed, I might say, but that's obvious. And also, the wheels of the government turn more slowly than the political wheels do. But nonetheless, that's something that you have to be willing to live with if you seek out federal service. But I encourage you very much to do so. I just Googled here a minute ago to bring up the oath of office that every federal employee needs to agree to, the oath that we all make on our first day on the job. I will support. It's going to make me cry. This is why I do this. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. In my stupid little job, this is what they want me to do. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose evasion. I'm sorry. I'm sure this seems stupid, but this is meaningful to me. And if this moves you like it does me, then you should be a federal employee and faithfully discharge the duties of the office, yada, yada. So help me God. If you want to make this a better place, you can do it in any way you want. You can just be kind to people and leave people smiling after they had an interaction with you. But also, you can really move the needle as a federal employee. The Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is run by OPM, is a great opportunity for high performers to enter into a pretty competitive program, but one that's getting a lot of emphasis this year. I have to say, I entered the program in 2010. And that year, And back in those days, it was very, very much focused through universities. It isn't so much anymore. If you want to learn more about the PMF program, then you're going to hear from me today. Go to pmf.gov, which is the OPM site that will tell you lots and lots about the program. Basically, there's an annual application cycle. There are assessments, that is to say, an online test that you have to go through, and the requirements change from year to year. And to be honest, I'm not the requirements. The hoops you have to jump through, the assessments and so forth, have evolved since I came through the program 12 years ago. But there's an annual cycle with applications typically in October. Those who pass the first hurdle become what's called a finalist. And once finalists are announced around Thanksgiving, you can apply to this program. Typically, somebody who's still in school is going to apply to this program in October of their final year of graduate school. It is open to people who are new recipients of advanced degrees, not undergraduate degrees, I'm afraid to say, but there are government programs for people who are in undergraduate, who are working on their undergraduate degree. I don't know as much about those. That's called the Pathways program. But the PMF program, again, go to pmf.gov. If you become a finalist, then you are invited to apply for a job with government agencies that advertise that they want a PMF. There's a database that you're given access to. We as the agencies list the positions. My agency, the Federal Transit Administration, is going to be seeking 10 PMFs. We've just announced in this upcoming year. We do have a new crop of finalists as of November. I want to remind everybody that the federal jobs are not just located in Washington, D.C. In fact, there are considerably more federal employees elsewhere around the United States and indeed around the world working for the U.S. government than there are in D.C. And well, what are the other important points I want to make about this? Once you're a finalist, it's applying for jobs, but you've shown typically, I think around 10% of the people who apply make it to finalists. OPM is making a big effort this year to recruit like crazy. And they announced after, I think we had maybe 300 finalists last year, they want 1,000 this year. That's what they're shooting for. In general, PMF program or not, so I'm not telling you the major benefit of the PMF program. 2-year fellowship, and you basically get around many of the civil service requirements, the hurdles required to get a federal job. It's kind of a backdoor hiring process. Some agencies even come close to abusing it in that way by hiring so many PMFs rather than following the established civil service process, but I won't go down that road. After your 2-year fellowship, you've gotten typically a 2-grade increase. You'll come in as a GS9 or a GS11, and I'll leave it up to you to look up what those positions pay, and what you make depends on the part of the country you're in. And after the 2-year program, you've got a two grade, not a 2-step, but a 2-grade increase, which is it's very, very unusual for any other federal employee to move up 2 grades in 2 years, because you're training intensively for, if they're doing it right, you're training intensively for a particular target position. The target positions which my agency is hiring for right now are transportation program specialists. These are people who and a generalist could potentially qualify for one of these jobs, the right generalist. But particularly people with transportation experience or transportation training. But our agency, Federal Transit Administration, we hire a lot of planners, Levin College planning program. We are a small agency in DOT. This is my plug here now for my home agency. And this is important to me. We are the largest recipient in the entire U.S. Department of Transportation of, did I get thrown off again? Oh, sorry. I was afraid I got knocked off again. Of the aid funds, which were distributed prior to the infrastructure bill. There's a lot of DOT that's getting infrastructure law funding, but the various COVID program funds that Congress appropriated prior to the passing the infrastructure bill, like 2/3 or 3/4 of those are going to us. And we're this tiny little fish in the big Department of Transportation. There were like 550, maybe 600 of us out of 60,000 people total in the US Department of Transportation. Most of those 60,000 are air traffic controllers working for FAA or bridge engineers working for the Federal Highway Administration. Our job at FTA is to evaluate and award grants for local transit projects. The Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, gets a decent amount of money from FTA, both through formula grants and through discretionary grants managed by our Region 5 office in Chicago. But planners, seriously, think about a federal career with FTA or one of our sister agencies in the Department of Transportation. How do you do this? You go to usajobs.gov. That is the hub for all federal employment. usajobs.gov, and apply for the PMF program when it comes around in October. If you're going to be getting your master's that year, why not? It doesn't cost anything. You may, and if you've been following usajobs.gov and maybe set up some searches on there that automatically send you emails when certain kinds of jobs are posted, it's a pretty cool system. It's really, really useful. And you can use it to help you track the federal opportunities that are out there. And when October comes around, apply for the PMF program. It won't cost you a cent, and you may be very, very pleasantly, very, very pleased with what comes out of it. And do you care if I am happy to leave my email address if anybody wants to get in touch with me and has further questions about federal jobs. It's just turo.dexter@dot.gov. My name that you see on the screen there with a dot in between @dot.gov. I would be happy to field any questions anybody has about federal jobs, describe it perhaps a little more coherently than I'm doing here. And if you come out to DC, let me know. We'll get together. I'll show you around.
Thanks so much, Turo. Yeah, if you don't mind, we could probably share your contact info in the email after the event. And again, as we approach 5:30, after I ask our final question to Becca, we will transition to audience Q&A. So I already see we have a few questions in there. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to throw them in there. So our last question is for Becca. So Becca, how do your day-to-day duties differ as a supervisor versus when you're a senior operations analyst? I know you said that maybe supervisor isn't the best title for your current position, but do you see, any main differences? Because I know as a student, almost graduating, those titles can be a bit tricky, not knowing what they mean or never hearing of them. So if you want to just talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And there's some, I have to share some interesting context that I was hired as a senior operations analyst. Let's see, that would have been in October of 2018. And so typically the senior operations analysts at the hospital are really focused on payer mix, patient volumes, really trying to dig in and understand what stories we can glean from the data that's available about the patients that we're serving, and then how we can maximize the efficiencies and the effectiveness of the care and services that we're delivering. And so my role was to provide that kind of support for our team of public health researchers. Within 6 weeks of being hired, our director left under challenging circumstances. There was a health situation with one of our senior researchers, and our administrative assistant, who kind of was like the glue that held all of the administrative type tasks together, was injured on the job. And so then I started to tell people that they should wear like a bike helmet and buckle their seatbelts, and started to get really concerned because we were losing people left and right. But so the lesson there was that I had to suddenly become multiple people, or I felt sort of the need to do that. And so I think that in many ways, the opportunity to step into a new role kind of bubbled up, and I decided to jump in. Like, there were other people who absolutely had more experience than I did, who were much more well-versed within our system than I was. The role I was hired for was very internal, focused mostly on our team and supporting the needs of the projects that our team was working on. But quickly I realized that because we didn't have a director, that there needed to be some much more intentional effort to do outreach with other parts of the hospital. And here's where I feel like this was like my secret win that I don't even know I thought about intentionally at the time, but I really used my role as someone who was new to the system to my advantage, because I could ask any question of anybody. And not only did they know what had gone on, that we had this huge leadership transition that had just happened, but I would really say, like, I would say, I'm new, I've been here for 2 months. And they would meet with me, they would share so much information with me, they would answer any question that I had. And I was able to build a network really quickly. And so that pivot from senior operations analyst for just my team to supervisor gave me a way to be able to build a network that extended much further, honestly, than I think if I had been hired outright as a supervisor. But during that transition time, it was kind of like it was like an unplanned stretch assignment. And so I decided that somebody had to kind of take charge and figure out how to do a lot of the functions that, you know, I was doing everything from like ordering paper to doing personnel reviews, just because somebody had to do it. And then, you know, getting grant applications in. I discovered that no one had built budgets in a long time or really kept up with them. And so I started to do that just because I wanted to understand how our team was paid. And then in the process, I wanted to understand how the doctors on those grants were paid, because all of that funding hadn't been quite managed maybe as well as it could have been. So I am now the grants manager for about $7 million in grants at the hospital. And so that became part of my role kind of by osmosis. But it also offered me all these opportunities to be able to expand the way that our team engages with other people in the hospital. And I was incredibly lucky that our current director, who is a practicing pediatrician, was part of the team at the time as the senior researcher, and that the leadership at the hospital recognized that she, even though she was a junior in the research world, that she's incredibly smart, and she's really kind, and she's really intentional about creating space for people to learn. And so we kind of like closed the door, and we were like, we're going to figure this out together. Like, we're going to learn together how to do this, how to run this little team. And so we've really been able to expand the reach, and we're now doing much more diverse types of research. We're working with a lot more collaborative teams throughout the hospital system and the community. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we had to kind of learn on the fly. But I think, to go back to your original question, it was really the pivot from like the internal focus of that original job to sort of the external focus at first within my own network of our system, of our hospital system, but also then within the larger community. And in a lot of interesting ways, those relationships went back to some of the informational interviews that I did like 2 years before or leading up to the time that I was hired. And they're people that I'm in contact with now in my job on a regular basis. So my kind of Cleveland network has continued to grow and evolve, but I think that all of those things kind of come together and they come full circle. And for me, it's always a good reminder that, like, if I look around the room and I'm like, oh, there's a couple of people that I know, that's great. It tells me I'm in the right Zoom room mostly these days. But then the people that I don't, just making sure that I make an effort to reach out to them and create those connections, because I think they become so critically important later. when, you know, another grant opportunity comes up, or there's a project that someone's working on, and I can remember that there is somebody that I cross paths with. And I have to say, it's one of my favorite things about Cleveland. Like, it's this amazing big little town. Like, we're probably never more than, you know, 2 degrees of separation, and it's not unusual. Well, we don't do anything social anymore, but but it wasn't unusual to like go to a barbecue and quickly realize that I had, you know, met somebody at a meeting, or that they knew somebody who knew somebody. And so those connections, I think, really help to reinforce the work that we do collectively as people who work in the public sector, regardless of where you fall within, you know, the nonprofit, the government side of the world, or if you're working in corporate America. I think there's a lot of complementary opportunities out there.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. We want to transition now into some audience questions. This first one comes from Michaela, who asks, how do you learn the culture of an organization before you start working there, or can you? And Andrew, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela, for the question. Yeah, the culture of an organization. Yeah, I don't know if you can fully appreciate, yeah, the culture, yeah, as an outsider necessarily. I guess, yeah, the interview process, ideally, you know, if you're, you know, interviewee, you would be asking some questions during that interview and trying to decipher, you know, what really makes this organization tick. Like, I've read their website, I understand what they do, but who are they actually, and how do they function as a team? So hopefully, like, you could start to maybe figure some of that out, you know, during that interview process, because I really think it's just as important that as someone who's, you know, you're on the other end of the table being interviewed, that you take the time to also ask questions and dig into the organization as well. Because it's just as important that it's a right fit for you as it is for the person interviewing you and hoping to hire you. So, you know, I think you can start to maybe piece together some bits and pieces of like the culture, and if it is the right fit from that. You know, I think too, you know, I don't have too many professional experiences like the Cleveland Council on World Affairs, where I've mostly been for my short professional career so far. It definitely felt like the right fit. I knew I wanted to be in a smaller office setting that wasn't too hierarchical. And, you know, so it was just kind of the right fit from an organizational perspective there. Yeah, maybe I'll pause there and turn to, yeah, I think Elaine maybe wanted to add to that. Go for it.
I think I'm the one who introduced the concept, and I jotted some things down in the chat, but I actually think there's a number of things that you can do. And, you know, one is see if you can connect with a couple of people who work at that organization. So hop on LinkedIn. And I'm not good at LinkedIn, but put in the name of that organization and see who shows up, and then just reach out to them and say, hey, what's it like looking there? Another thing is to, you know, clearly get on the website of the organization and see what they're talking about and look at who their staff is. Another thing that I do a lot, I highly recommend everybody get Crane's Cleveland Business and, you know, look through that. And you'll see everything from stories to ads. And I'll just use an example. You know, you come across and there's an ad from a law firm. And first of all, everyone in the picture is Caucasian. Ding. Secondly, they're all wearing dark suits. Ding, ding. Okay, that tells me something that's going to be a very formal, probably a very traditional culture. Okay, so get annual reports. Even nonprofits have to generate annual reports. Again, see who the staff are, see who's getting promoted, see what types of initiatives do they have. Do they have a sustainability program? Are they measuring themselves on sustainability? Are they reporting on, you know, promotion of women? Are they reporting on diversity, equity, and inclusion? And these will tell you something about, what they're doing. You never really understand a culture till you get in it, because let's face it, people do not put in their reports the negative sides of their culture. People generally don't write articles on the negative side until there's a controversy. But what you can look for are which of these organizations are doing cool things, and which of them are doing things that just sound kind of like the place that my dad or my mom worked. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but that's how you can start to kind of get a gauge for, what it would be like to work. Is it, how casual is it? How open are people to new ideas? Do they make an effort to make sure that all people are mentored? And particularly those who have not typically been mentored, like women and minorities and things like that. So that's just a couple thoughts. Becca, what do you think? You were nodding a lot.
I'm so glad you mentioned cranes. That was one of the most unexpected and impactful pieces of advice somebody gave us when we first decided to move to Cleveland. And there's so much that I find out through cranes and honestly, part of it's because our media consumption has changed so much. It's hard, but I can flip through cranes and yeah, I absolutely agree with that piece of advice. And the only other addition I would make is just ask around. There's the culture, there's the internal culture, which Elaine's absolutely right. You won't know until you're there and you get to experience it. And it may be different at the very small unit level, in your department or your office than it is for the entire organization as a whole, because let's face it, the person you work for and the person you sit next to has a lot of influence over how you experience the culture of the company as a whole. But there's also that sort of external culture, and what's the impression, what's the reputation that the organization has in the community? Is the reputation of, they say one thing, but they do another? Do people cycle through there quickly? You can kind of glean some of that from the outside. And again, Cleveland being the big, small town, you can start to ask some questions and people will be happy to tell you. And just recognize that you're going to get the Amazon reviews. You're going to hear the very, very best and you're going to hear the very, very worst, but at least you've asked the question.
I'll just say a big part of the culture of my agency is tied to its mission. We have a bunch of real serious type A transit nerds working at least in the program offices. And that creates a lot of our culture. So look at an agency's mission if you're looking at a government agency. And I love the advice of going on LinkedIn and finding somebody in that agency to talk to. There are a lot of Facebook groups too out there for people who work in a particular field or work for a particular company. You might be able to see into a few of those.
Thank you so much, mentors. So we have another question here from Courtney Began. She asks, I'm curious to know if any of our amazing panelists have a specific project that they've worked on that they think is their favorite and why. And I know that, Elaine, you did, answer that one. So if you have anything to add, you could, but we're going to start off with Turo.
Land Bank blows all the rest of them away. Cuyahoga County Land Bank. You don't know about them and you're in Cleveland, you should.
I guess I'll jump in here. Wow, so many exchange programs that come to mind as my favorite. Yeah, I don't mean to brag because it sounds pretty cool, but probably my favorite was a group of law enforcement officers that were here in March of 2019, and it was a group on protecting soft targets, and had an opportunity to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade with CPD and with this group of international law enforcement officers as kind of a direct program link to how do you keep a parade route or a large public event safe. So that's probably one of the coolest like Cleveland specific things I have done on an international exchange project. Professionally, I'd say, I guess on a little bit more serious note, one of the newer programs that the Cleveland Council on World Affairs has that's not directly tied to my work with exchanges, although I started working on it, is a leadership development program for young professionals, probably your age, around 20 to 35 years old. And working on that program, we just last month finished the second iteration of it, has really pushed me in a lot of ways beyond what I typically do with the exchange work, to think a little bit more critically about leadership skill building and intercultural competency, working with diverse teams. So I guess a little plug, if any of you are interested in finding out more about that program, visit ccwa.org. But definitely more recently, that is a program that it's been a lot of fun to get kind of out of my comfort zone with the exchange work and focus on developing a curriculum, helping to develop a curriculum around some of those topics.
I'll just, I put a couple specific things in the chat, but I thought of a couple more. One was when I was in heavy industry at GE, I developed an education and training program on how to be in compliance with environment, health, and safety in a fun way. And it turned out to be, everyone enjoyed it because it was an interactive, participative thing. And it kind of set the standard for how to take boring topics and make them interesting. And that got me promoted into the Six Sigma thing to do the same thing with statistics. The other thing I did when I was at the Holden Arboretum, it sounds kind of small, but I shifted our Christmas party to be a winter holiday party with a message that not everybody on our staff was Christian, and that we really should have a party that was inclusive of everyone. And then we also totally invited everyone to bring a domestic partner. Particularly, we had some LGBTQ, and that had never happened at the Holden Arboretum before. So I was kind of pleased about that. In my current role, getting the Cuyahoga River designated as a state designated water trail, that was many years, and finally got that done. And just a bunch of stuff I'm doing on with trails right now.
I will round us out with a little bit of insight about the Neighborhood Story Project, which is a 2-year study that's currently underway in Midtown. Many of you may be familiar with all of the neighborhood transformation and development that's happening in that community. It's home to our UH Rainbow Ahuja Center for Women and Children. That clinic has been open in the space for, I think, about 3.5 years now, but there's so much community investment and community development that's happening, and there's a lot of, I hesitate to use the word concern, but there's a lot of consideration for how these changes are impacting members of the community and neighbors who have lived in the area for a very long time. And there's a lot of rich history in the neighborhoods that surround Midtown. We recognize that Midtown it's a development district. It's not a neighborhood, but the neighborhoods around it, we really want to understand how these changes impact people. And so we're doing a mixed method qualitative series of interviews followed through like 2 years of walking tours with people so they can show us their neighborhood and tell us about the stories of where they grew up or the places where they spend time. And then there's this really cool process where that all gets like GPS and GIS here. There's GIS folks in this class, right? It gets layered in. I don't even know how this happens, But all of the themes and like these heat maps start to emerge, and it's so much data that we really haven't even like figured out. I am just sitting back in awe of what the researchers are accomplishing and what we're learning. And so we'll look at that over time and the trends of how those changes are impacting people's lives, because ultimately we want to be able to tell the story of whether or not the changes that we see are appreciated and are benefiting people who've lived in the neighborhoods, not just the result of shifting demographics as the neighborhoods grow and evolve and change. So there's lots more to come there. We really haven't, we're just doing preliminary analysis right now of the initial data set. So more to learn there.
Thank you all. I think we have time for one or two more questions. This one comes from Michelle, who is an environmental studies MA student at Levin. What do you find is the most difficult part of working in your field and or in your sector? How do you deal with or respond to that challenge? And I think Elaine had a really great answer to this in the chat. So if you could share that with us, that would be great.
Coming out of very fast-paced business world and then having to adjust to sometimes the glacial speed that things get done in government is, for me, the hardest. I tend to get ahead of myself. I'm not really sure how I deal with it, but just having patience, you know, to try to figure out the different ways to get something to move, knowing that there are a lot of things that are going to slow it down. And how do you deal with it? You stay physically active yourself, stay healthy, go out with your friends.
I want to second that. For me, the way that manifested was being used to, you know, I was self-unemployed for 25 years as a consultant, and I would need to do everything myself. And if something needed to be done, even if I didn't know how to do it, as I mentioned earlier, I'd stay up all night and figure out how to do it, and I'd get it done, and hopefully it'd be good enough for the client. It doesn't work like that in a big organization. You work with teams, and you're dependent on other people, and they're going to come in. Some of them are going to be way above average, and some of them are going to be below average, and it doesn't work out real well if you go in there like a steamroller and expect everybody to give everything the same priorities that you do. Organizational life is a very important thing to study while you have the opportunity, while you're still in school. Take those organizational development, organizational behavior classes that Levin offers, and pay close attention. There's a lot of important information in there.
I guess I'll go next. I think currently the biggest challenge I'm facing, I mean, just like many other people, is probably like a work-life balance question, especially in the midst of COVID and trying to stay motivated with my work in still a virtual environment, although we're starting to do some kind of like hybrid programs locally here in the community, which is really encouraging. But yeah, I really think, you know, Elaine, to your point of just like knowing when to step away actually, and taking a break really. And also I'm really starting to realize the importance of saying no. And I think in the nonprofit sector in particular, this is a really valuable skill that I'm really starting to realize how important it is. As you know, working at a small nonprofit, definitely tend to be like a generalist and tend to be, you know, there's a notion of being like a jack of all trades, like, you know, picking up the slack when it comes to, you know, ordering copy paper like Becca was doing, or, you know, the little things like that, managing, you know, our technology, managing, you know, kind of, you know, HR concerns, you know, et cetera, you name it. You know, kind of everyone at a small nonprofit tends to dabble in a little bit of each area. What I'm starting to realize though is that it's not always sustainable to take on everything, and that saying no is okay.
I echo everything Andrew just said, and would add, I think my take on it is kind of from the competing priorities perspective, and that applies both to the competing priorities of home and work. And I admire your use of balance. I have decided that balance isn't even like a word that I'm going to entertain anymore, and I refer to it as the juggle now, recognizing that sometimes you have to know what ball is going to bounce, and you just let it go and recognize you're going to catch it on the next pass or whatever. But I think competing priorities in my professional role, not only from the time perspective of just trying to decide like when is good enough, and working with a team of researchers, it's really hard. They really don't like for something to be good enough. It has to be perfect. So sometimes I have to like claw the draft out of their hands and be like, it's fine, it's great. But also, you know, there's always going to be more. There's never going to be enough resources. We're never going to be able to meet all of the needs of all of the people all of the time. And so how to create a shared understanding of what success looks like and what our priorities are, so that we can be thoughtful about when it's time to de-implement a program, or we can be really intentional about what funding to pursue, because just because there's a lot of dollars assigned to it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for our mission or for our capacity. And so I think that those competing priorities are always kind of rolling, and thinking about remembering, like staying grounded in what needs to be at the top of that list. And sometimes that's an opportunity that I have from our evaluation role that our team plays on many of the projects we work with, is to be able to objectively remind the clinical leads that like that's not the top priority right now, even though it sounds incredible. But what's the reach of that program going to look like? Or what's the sustainability capacity for that program? Or do we really know that it's going to work the way that it worked in Chicago or Detroit? So I think those competing priorities are always, it's tough. It's like, you know, picking a favorite stuffed animal or something. Like, you know, it's a challenge, but yeah, I would go with that.
You know, I think it's worth pointing out to all of you who are listening, not one of us listed a technical skill as the hardest thing for us. And I think that's worth noting. So as we go through in professions, we talk about the hard skills and the soft skills. And, you know, the hard skills are the literally the things that you have to do. If you're in IT and you need to program, that's a hard skill. But as you grow and mature, and even right out of the gates, the soft skills, how to think through prioritization, interpersonal, interacting with other people, knowing when to push hard and knowing when to not be the steamroller, as Turo put it. So just interesting that all four of us really talked about soft skills.
Thank you all so much. We did have just one more question, but I want to be cognizant of our time. We have to wrap up in about 2 minutes here. But this is a really quick one. If any of the mentors want to chime in, Taylor Casey asks, when is the best time to start an internship?
Now.
And that's what I said. I wish that I had done internships all through undergrad rather than going back home and doing summer jobs.
Yeah, I echo Elaine and Turo on that.
But the only other thing that I would suggest to you is that you can turn a job into an internship. And if you think about, Turo kind of did that. He went up to Jim Rackakis and said, he used the word internship, and that's good because it's non-threatening. It's not like, I'm not asking you to hire me forever. But you can connect with people and organizations and say, can I come and work on a short-term basis for you? We call that an internship. But what you want to do is to build into it, not just, I think it was Andrew said, you know, serving coffee and doing photocopying. You want to build into it exposure to everyone who works there, learning what every person does. So there are tasks that you do when you're doing your job, but ask. And I'll give an example. I did have a summer job with General Motors after my freshman year of college, and I was filing. And the guy who was the director of our departments, said, hey, he was this New York guy. Hey, you talk like this. What do you really want to do? And I said, I'm kind of into water pollution and stuff like that. And he said, oh, well, what took you up? I mean, he made a phone call to the guy who did environment, health, and safety for that plant. And I was allowed, and I thought it was a big deal that I was allowed to leave my filing job. But he said, no, I spent a half a day with this guy, and he showed me the oil skimmers and the places we discharge and stuff like that. Most good employers are going to honor you if you ask. So you can turn a summer job into an internship.
No ask, no get.
I like that, Turo. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Elaine. And I'll just say maybe one thing that will definitely like go a long ways when you're doing that ask is just trying to also just have some base level knowledge of the organization or the person you're asking, and just keeping, cognizance that, this person is taking time for you as well, and just doing as much homework as you can possibly can to make that ask, a little bit easier on that person's end as well. I think that, it's simple, but I think it really goes a long way, just to show that you are interested and you really do care.
My internship that I will say my husband and I both had internships that turned into jobs that were created for us when we were going through grad school. And that was as like late career return to grad school. So we are like the absolute endorsers of the value of the internship. But the question that I asked the woman that I was hoping to work for, I said, is there anything in your organization that you've always wanted to do, but have just never had someone who could dedicate time to it? And she thought about it for about 30 seconds, and she handed me a project, and she said, come back in 3 months. And she gave me full reign. And I came back in 3 months with a full proposal, and we actually had a funded grant by that point, and we kicked it off. And so then I got a job.
Thank you all so much. So I think we're going to hand it off to Rob now to close this out.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm so thankful for everybody's participation today. I'm very proud of Emily and Ameera for being the moderators of this panel. One of the things we want to do at the college is to give our students opportunity to grow and to shine and to have opportunities to lead these discussions. And you both did an amazing job in that. And I'm very proud of the hard work behind the scenes and what you did today. Alexandra, thank you for leading the charge and putting all this all together and helping everybody get here today. So thank you to our team. I'm just blessed and honored to be here. And I want to say thank you to our panelists, Elaine, Andrew, Becca, and Turo. It's wonderful to hear your experiences and your stories. And, Turo, I'm really glad that you got a little emotional, and I feel the same way. Like, if you have no passion for the things that you're doing, why are you here? And I think that everybody on this panel and everybody that we work with, we're here because we want to make a difference in the world, and it matters. And last year, or 2 years ago, when the pandemic hit and we had the social justice issues and all kinds of nonsense going on, I kind of felt like the Dunkin' Donuts guy. Like, what am I doing? Like, what are we here for? And then that kind of stirred up something in my belly about we're here for a reason. And I'm so glad that you kind of expressed that today, because it's true. If you don't have passion, you don't have anything. And I just want to leave, besides saying thank you, the two things I came across from all the panelists was the fact of being obviously passionate about what they do, but also the fact that they made things happen instead of waiting for something to happen. Creating opportunities, being there to take advantage of them, and going out and being aggressive to make things happen. And there's 4 different examples of what that looks like and 4 different ways to serve our community. So I just want to say thank you for everybody's contributions today on behalf of the college and the dean and our students that are here and our special guests. We just want to say thank you for your contributions and look forward to things in the future. On that note, I want to put a little plug in for our next event, which is our Speed Resume Review Day, which is going to be on February 23rd, which is a Wednesday. It's going to be from 4:30 to 6. Everybody's invited to participate. It's going to be a neat event, a virtual event, but we're looking to kind of expand our horizons and kind of make it more interactive. So you'll learn more information about that. And if you want to register or get more information, feel free to reach out to Alexandra or our team, and we can go from there. So once again, I hope that everybody enjoyed the day as much as I did. Thank you for your contributions. Have a safe, warm, and productive evening, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.